Let my sister move in after her ex cheated on her and she got divorced. But she instead started walking around in lingerie in front of my husband, and I caught them cheating. I will just get straight to the point. My older sister, Bree, is a homewrecker. She has become someone I can barely recognize, someone I never imagined I'd feel this much resentment toward. Growing up, we had a typical sibling relationship with its ups and downs, but nothing could have prepared me for the betrayal I've felt in recent times. To be blunt, she has done the absolute worst thing any sister could ever do to her own family. This all started when Bree's own marriage crumbled last year. She had been married to her ex-husband, Milo, for a while, but their relationship hit rock bottom when she discovered he had been cheating on her, and not just with one woman, he had been sleeping with multiple young women from his office. Bree, being the intuitive person she is, had grown suspicious of his behavior for some time. One day, following her gut instincts, she followed him from the office after he said he had to work late. She tracked him to a hotel, and her worst fears were confirmed when she caught him red-handed with his secretary in one of the rooms. The confrontation that followed was explosive, to say the least. Bree completely lost it, as anyone would in such a heartbreaking situation. She shouted at him, threw whatever she could grab, and even slapped the other woman out of pure rage. Milo, shockingly, didn't seem the least bit remorseful. He didn't apologize or try to explain himself. In fact, he didn't even flinch when Bree, in a fit of tears and fury, announced that she wanted a divorce. Instead of showing any regret, Milo was furious at Bree for having caused such a scene in the hotel. Apparently, he frequented that place often and didn't want his reputation tarnished. To make matters worse, Milo kicked her out of their home like she was nothing. Because they had signed a prenuptial agreement before getting married, Bree had no claim to any of his assets. He knew that she couldn't touch his wealth, and he used that power over her without a shred of compassion. With no other options, Bree came to me for help, broken and defeated, as we both live in the same cities while our parents live a few hours away. At the time, I didn't even hesitate to take her in, feeling nothing but sympathy for what she was going through. Little did I know what she was going to do with me next. So, at the time, I was married to my husband, Archie. He and I were each other's best friends. We always had this incredible bond where we just got each other. We both had fast-paced, career-driven lives, and even though our jobs kept us busy, we always made time for each other. But things changed when Archie suddenly lost his job. His company had to downsize, and he was one of the unlucky ones let go. It hit him hard. Being the type of person who was always focused on his career, this was the first time he found himself in a situation where he didn't quite know what to do next. Of course, he immediately started applying for jobs at other companies, but the reality of the job market was tough. The offers he received didn't come close to matching the salary he had been making at his previous company. I could see that this was taking a toll on him. Despite the disappointment, Archie wasn't the kind of man who could sit idle. Even though the pay wasn't as good, he accepted a job offer from a solid company just to get back into the workforce. I know it wasn't easy for him to accept a lower paying job after being in a higher position. With his new income, I was earning about twice as much as he was, but honestly, I never gave it much thought. I certainly never made my husband feel any less because of it. Our marriage had always been based on mutual respect and equality, not on who was making more. We had bought our house together, and even though we didn't have kids yet, we were managing everything just fine. As long as Archie continued to contribute his share of the bills every month, which he did, without fail, I didn't care whether his paycheck was smaller than mine or not. When Bree moved in with us, my husband, Archie, took some time to adjust. We're both naturally introverted, and we had always cherished the quiet, intimate space we'd created together. To make things more uncertain, I didn't even know how long Bree would be staying with us. It wasn't clear whether she'd be there for a few weeks or if this would stretch into something longer. However, I wanted to be there for my sister, and Archie understood. In the beginning, Bree was a complete wreck. She was shattered after her marriage fell apart and spent most of her days holed up in the guest room, crying. There were days when she refused to get out of bed at all, and honestly, I wasn't sure how to help her. She seemed lost. It was heartbreaking to watch my sister like this, so vulnerable and defeated. I did my best to be there for her, encouraging her to get up, to talk about her feelings, and offering a shoulder to cry on whenever she needed it. My parents were also very supportive. They would visit Bree every weekend, and they were grateful that I was there for her during such a difficult and emotionally draining time. It was a slow process, but as days turned into weeks, Bree started feeling a bit more like herself, little by little. She started to join me for my morning runs or come along for late-night walks after dinner. Bree even started helping me out around the house, whether it was cooking or running errands like going to the grocery store. I could see that she was starting to come out of her shell and regain some sense of normalcy, and I was proud of her for that. I think the real trouble truly began when Bree started connecting with a group she found on Facebook, a divorced women's support group. After everything she'd been through, it made sense that she would want to find a community of women who had experienced similar situations. Initially, it seemed like a good thing for her, and she met multiple women who, like her, had been blindsided by their husband's infidelity. Bree would often come home after their weekly meetups saying how much better she felt after venting to these women. I was genuinely happy that she was making friends and getting out of the house more often, which felt like a healthy step forward. But this group of women, while perhaps supportive in some ways, also spent a lot of time going to clubs and having girls' night out where they would often get men to buy them drinks or dance with them all night. At first, I believed Bree deserved to have fun after everything she'd been through. But then she started coming home completely drunk, out of her wits, almost regularly. She even began bringing strangers into our home to spend the night with her. Sometimes she would not even give me or Archie a heads up, and it would make us feel extremely uncomfortable about the whole situation, as my sister can be incredibly loud. Soon after that, Bree went through a total transformation. She cut her hair short and dyed it blonde, a bold move to maybe just break free from the person she used to be. She also started dressing more provocatively, clothes that were far sexier than anything she had worn before. Again, I didn't judge her for wanting to look her best or trying to feel confident after such a major life upheaval. But what irked me was the way she started dressing inside our home, especially around my husband, Archie. She began walking around in what can only be described as lingerie-like dresses, even while doing everyday things like cooking in the kitchen or doing her laundry. It felt wildly inappropriate, especially considering this was our shared space, and Archie was right there. I remember one time laughing awkwardly and asking her what on earth she was wearing when I could see her innerwear, and she responded confidently that she just felt empowered in her new look. Her behavior outside the house was also becoming more extreme. She'd go out in shorts or skirts that were so short they could have blown up with the slightest breeze, and her tops often left little to the imagination. Her cleavage was constantly on display. I didn't want to be controlling or unsupportive, but it was also important to me that Bree respected the fact that this was our home too. After everything had been building up for some time, I finally decided to sit Bree down for a talk. I wanted to be honest with her, but also kind, because my intention wasn't to criticize or shame her. However, Bree completely misinterpreted my intentions. She became furious with me, accusing me of trying to school her on how she should or shouldn't dress. She acted like I was attacking her, and things escalated quickly from there. She went so far as to claim that I was shaming her for her choices and her lifestyle, and to make things worse, she dragged Archie into the conversation. Bree turned to him and directly asked if he agreed with me that her outfits were provocative. Archie didn't say much. He's not the type to get into confrontations, but he did nod, clearly looking embarrassed. Bree's face turned red with anger and maybe a bit of surprise. It was obvious she didn't expect him to side with me. She just laughed, looking at us awkwardly, and told me that I was lucky to have a husband who supported me. I just shook my head and smiled at her. Even though we had this conversation, Bree never toned down her outfits. It was like the talk had been in vain, and she continued wearing the same provocative clothes around Archie and me. However, what made things even more unsettling was how her behavior around my husband started to shift. I began noticing how Bree started to actively engage with Archie. She began sitting down with him for breakfast, insisting on chatting with him more often. Archie, being the introvert that he is, usually stayed to himself and didn't go out of his way to talk to her. But Bree started putting herself in his space, making an effort to connect with him. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured she was just trying to bond with my husband, maybe to make her stay with us feel less awkward. But over time, it started to feel different. Every day after work, I'd come home to find Bree and Archie sitting together, sometimes sharing a glass of wine. It struck me as strange because Archie would usually be doing his own thing when I got home, but now, he seemed to be spending more time with Bree. They looked comfortable, maybe too comfortable, and it made me uneasy in a way I couldn't explain. The worst part was Bree's constant teasing. She would joke about how my husband missed me for not being home soon and that I needed to cut down on my work hours and spend more time with him like a good wife should. It irritated me to no end to hear her say that because I was working incredibly hard at the time. I was leading an important project at work, and being the project manager, I had no choice but to stay late at the office most nights. This was a crucial time in my career, and I thought Archie understood that. I believed he supported me fully in my efforts, but Bree's comments made me feel self-conscious, like I was somehow failing as a wife by not being at home more. I brushed it off at first, thinking Bree was just being Bree, outspoken and a little too forward with her jokes. But the more I thought about it, the more those words gnawed at me. I began to notice Archie spending more and more time with Bree, to the point where it felt like she was slowly slipping into a role in our marriage that made me uncomfortable. The things Archie and I used to do together as a couple, small, everyday activities like grocery shopping, going out for dinner, or just spending time together, Bree was now tagging along for, almost like a third wheel. At first, I tried not to think about it. But soon, whenever I had to cancel plans because of work, Archie and Bree would just go ahead and do things together without me. If I was stuck late at the office, they'd head to dinner on their own or run errands like grocery shopping together. I hate to admit it, but I started feeling replaced by my own sister. Bree seemed to like the attention Archie was giving her. She had been so lost and broken when she first moved in with us, and now, it was like she was soaking up all this affection and companionship, not from me, but from my husband. The two of them were forming their own bond, and it was happening right in front of me. I tried to brush away the unsettling feelings creeping in, telling myself I was just being paranoid, but deep down, I couldn't shake the growing sense that something was definitely off. Then, one evening, I came home from another long day at work and was completely taken aback to see a little puppy running around our living room. I stood frozen for a moment, absolutely shocked, because I am highly allergic to dogs, and both Archie and Bree know that very well. Before I could even process what was happening, Bree came rushing out from the kitchen, scooped up the puppy, and started kissing it. I asked her what the hell a dog was doing in our house. Bree told me that she and Archie had decided to buy a puppy together. I was dumbfounded. What did she mean by she and Archie? This wasn't her house. This wasn't her decision to make, especially not without even consulting me. I immediately stormed into the kitchen, where Archie was cooking dinner, and demanded an explanation. I was furious. How could he go behind my back like this? Archie calmly explained that he had always wanted a dog, and since Bree was now single and living with us, she wanted a pet too. So, the two of them had decided, on their own, to get a dog. I asked him, quite loudly, if he didn't remember my severe allergies, and before he could answer, Bree butted in, telling me she had promised him that she would be keeping the dog in her room only. She even had the nerve to suggest I start taking allergy medication so they could continue to have the dog in the house. She spoke about how both she and Archie had fallen in love with the puppy and couldn't imagine parting with it. I could feel the rage building inside me, but I didn't want to explode. I told Bree to lock the dog in her room, at least until I could get my hands on some allergy medication. I was seething with anger and discomfort. How dare they make such a big decision, one that directly affected me, without even asking for my input. The whole situation felt wrong on so many levels. Archie and Bree had started acting like a couple, making decisions that affected our household. It wasn't just about the dog anymore. It was the fact that my husband and my sister had gone behind my back, and I was starting to feel like an outsider in my own home. Something was very, very wrong, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had a huge fight with Archie that night and asked him straight up if he perhaps had feelings for my sister. Archie looked dumbfounded and vehemently denied having anything to do with Bree in a romantic way. He clarified that he simply liked spending time with her since she was always at home while I was always busy with my work. I found this as an insult, so I reminded him that he was a workaholic just like me and worked for long hours when he was at his previous company. I pointed out how we both never had any issues with our jobs before. Archie had nothing to reply to and we both left the conversation at that. The very next week, I had a work trip lined up. It was supposed to be a quick 2-day trip, so I packed my suitcase and made sure both Bree and Archie knew I'd be gone. That evening, though, a heavy storm hit, and as luck would have it, my flight got cancelled. It was such a last-minute change, and I had no choice but to grab an Uber and head back home, a bit disappointed that the trip was off but relieved to be going back to my own bed. As I unlocked the door, I heard loud music playing from inside. My ears immediately perked up because the song that was playing was no ordinary song. It was the same one that had played during my wedding to Archie, a song that had always meant so much to us. I walked into the living room, expecting to find Archie and maybe Bree there, but the room was empty. The house felt eerily quiet, save for the music filling the space. I wandered into the kitchen and dining area and spotted 2 plates laid out on the table, the food half eaten, 2 empty wine glasses sitting beside them. My confusion turned into a knot in my stomach as I realized something was terribly wrong. Where were Bree and Archie? Then I heard a faint sound from upstairs. I walked up the staircase quietly. When I reached the top of the stairs, I stood outside our bedroom door, hesitating for a split second before turning the handle. The door swung open to reveal Bree, fully naked, on top of Archie, in my bed. For a split second, time stood still as I watched both of them do the unspeakable. Then, Archie suddenly spotted me and went wide-eyed. He immediately shoved Bree off him and started to wear his pants as he apologized, his words frantic and desperate. But Bree, she didn't say a word. Her face went pale, but what struck me the most was the complete lack of remorse in her eyes. She didn't even flinch. Something inside me snapped looking at her. I walked right up to her and without thinking, I slapped her across the face, hard. The sound echoed through the room, but it wasn't enough. I grabbed her by the hair, the rage fueling my strength as I dragged her out of the bedroom, and down the stairs, while she stumbled, trying to grab at her clothes that were falling off in the process. She tried scratching at my hands begging me to let her go, but my grip was too strong, and I wasn't letting go. She was struggling, but I didn't care. She kept looking back at Archie, screaming for him to help her, but he didn't say a single word. I didn't stop until I had dragged her outside of the house into the pouring rain. Half naked, soaked, and humiliated, she stood there, when I looked her dead in the eyes, and told her, "You are a homewrecker just like your cheating ex. And homewreckers, like you, belong to the streets, not in my home." I shoved her to the ground angrily as she started to cry, finally realizing the depth of her actions. She begged me to let her grab a few things, but I was done. I threw her phone out into the rain and told her she could call someone for help if she wanted because she wasn't stepping a foot back into my house again. All I felt was anger towards Bree. The sister I had once known was gone. She had destroyed everything, and as far as I was concerned, I never wanted to see her again. Eventually, Bree called our parents for help, and despite knowing the full extent of what she had done betraying me by sleeping with my husband, they still came over to rescue her. They helped pack up her things from my place and took her back to their home. They chose to stand by her, offering her shelter and emotional support, as though her actions were somehow forgivable. It made my blood boil. My parents even called me the next day, complaining about how Bree had fallen sick because I had made her stand outside in the pouring rain for too long that night. They had the audacity to shift the narrative, almost making it seem like I was the one in the wrong for throwing her out, as if I hadn't caught her in the most despicable act of betrayal. I didn't hold back. I told them, in no uncertain terms, that I couldn't care less if Bree got sick. I honestly hoped she would, because what she had done to me was unforgivable. She destroyed my marriage, tore apart my trust, and left me with scars that I would carry for the rest of my life. My parents, to my utter disbelief, tried to reason with me. They acknowledged that what Bree did was indeed wrong, but they kept defending her, saying it was very out of character and that she must have been going through a lot mentally after her own divorce to have committed such an act. They reasoned that I should hear her out, but I immediately shut it down. No amount of explanation could excuse the fact that she had slept with Archie in my house after I had rescued her back to health after her own divorce. I was beyond furious with my parents for even trying to bend over backward to excuse her behavior, as if the circumstances somehow justified her complete lack of morals. I told them that if they continued to support her, then I wanted nothing to do with them anymore. Meanwhile, I wasted no time in filing for divorce from Archie. He cried, he apologized, and he groveled for a second chance, but none of it mattered to me anymore. Whatever feelings I had for him were buried beneath layers of hurt and anger. I could never forgive him for what he had done. 7 months have passed since then, and I have no regrets. I have successfully divorced Archie, and because of his infidelity, I was able to get a significant amount of alimony from him. He never fought me on any of it. In fact, he quietly gave me whatever I wanted. I think he was too consumed by guilt to even argue. We sold the house, split the proceeds, and have gone our separate ways. Now, I live in a cozy apartment on my own, and it feels like a fresh start. If you had asked me just a year ago if I would ever divorce Archie, I would have laughed and said no. I thought we had a solid marriage, one built on mutual respect and trust. But that was clearly an illusion because that loser decided to sleep with my own sister. As painful as it was to go through, I'm glad I caught them when I did. I am happy that I didn't waste any more time in that pathetic marriage, and have rebuilt and moved forward in my life. Yesterday, I received an unexpected phone call from my parents, the first time they've reached out to me in months. They haven't really apologized or made any real effort to acknowledge what had happened with Bree and Archie, so hearing from them out of the blue already felt suspicious. My parents informed me how Bree has been so heavily depressed since the incident that she has resorted to stealing as a way to cope with herself. I was taken aback and asked them what they meant by that. My parents went on to explain that Bree had been secretly taking their debit and credit cards and withdrawing large amounts of cash from ATMs over the past few months. My parents aren't very tech savvy, so they never paid attention to the notifications on their phones for withdrawals or bank charges. Either they missed them completely or didn't think to check. It wasn't until my dad was planning a trip with my mom recently that he realized that a significant portion of their savings had vanished. When he checked their accounts and saw the pattern of withdrawals, he and mom confronted Bree. To my parents' shock, she admitted everything. She told them how she hated herself after what she had done to me and couldn't live with herself anymore. Apparently she'd been using the money to drink, buy weed, and who knows what else just to cope. I bluntly told my parents that frankly, I didn't care about any of it since it didn't matter how much my sister regretted it. This was something that she could never come back from. I told my parents that they were the ones who had chosen to take her in after everything, so they needed to deal with the consequences. But my parents started to insist that this thing with Bree involved all four of us, since my sister seemed to be suffering after the way I had been treating her for her mistake. They argued that I should talk to my sister and forgive her for everything since she is my family at the end of the day. They reasoned that since I no longer had a husband, I could perhaps help out Bree by letting her move in with me and we could start all over again as a family. They even suggested that we could all do family counseling together. I scoffed at their suggestions and told them, in no uncertain terms, that they were delusional to even ask me to do something like this. I reminded them, rather sharply, that the reason I didn't have a husband anymore was because of their daughter, the one they were still defending even after she had been stealing from them. Bree had destroyed my marriage, and they expected me to welcome her back into my life because she felt regretful? Never. I told them to stop including me in their family from now on, because, as far as I was concerned, I did not want to be a part of it. My parents feel I am being unreasonable for not giving my sister a second chance, Ida for not letting Bree back into my life after that homewrecker destroyed my life. Update 1. To be clear, I agree with some of the comments that my sister is clearly using what she did to me as an excuse to try and justify her stealing habits, hoping to gain sympathy from our parents. Hence, I've made the decision to permanently block my parents so they can no longer contact me. I'm exhausted by their constant excuses for Bree's behavior. My sister has never really apologized to me for what she put me through, but I've also reached a point where I no longer need an apology from anyone. I simply cut ties and move forward. Also, I would like to mention that I am much happier now and have gone out on a few dates here and there, so it's not like I am sitting at home and wallowing about my ex-husband and my sister. They made their choices, and I'm just relieved to be out of their lives. Honestly, neither of them deserve someone like me. Update 2. Bree called me from an unknown number last night. It turns out she stole our parents' credit card again to withdraw cash behind their backs. My dad was furious and demanded that she pack her bags and leave his house immediately. She called me from a friend's place, begging for my address so she could stay with me temporarily for a few days. I laughed at her and reminded her that if she ever showed up at my door, I'd make sure she regretted it. I told her I was glad she was homeless and that her ex had cheated on her because she had always been such a loser. I know those words must have stung, but I'm just so pissed at her. I am confident she won't have the nerve to reach out to me ever again. Update 3. It seems 8 months have passed since my last update. A lot has happened since then, so I wanted to keep you updated. First, my parents sent me an email apologizing for their blind support of Bree. They said they felt really bad for her back then since she had gone through such a horrible divorce with her ex. They admitted that they should have never supported her for what she did to me. In the email, they also mentioned how Bree had been caught shoplifting and had to spend a night in jail. She had begged our parents to bail her out. Since this was her first offense, she got off with community service. However, she had finally come clean to them about her frequent substance abuse, so they had no choice but to admit her to rehab, hoping for her to recover. They have asked me to unblock them so they can talk to me about this further. However, I have chosen not to respond to their email and will continue to keep my distance. On a brighter note, I've been dating a guy named Harry for the past 2 months. Our relationship is still new, but I'm really happy with him. Despite everything that's happened, I'm choosing to focus on the positive changes in my life and looking forward to the future. I'm hoping this will be my final update. Take care.